It is difficult to find a suitable starting point for this tale, for my wishes to impart the feelings I have, even now so many years after the fact, are proving to be elusive at best. The small country town in which I spent my childhood and youth was no different to most others. All towns have their histories, stories of how they came to be. My town has a history, stories of migrant peasant farmers who, for a time, lived in shelters made of Hessian bags around the turn of the 20th century. Since then, that place, known throughout history as Bagtown, has grown, succumbing to industry and technology, thriving and busy, though its occupants are unaware of a darker side, which is also part of their history, something that has never been told, something that should perhaps remain untold, but not this day. Bagtown Cemetery is old, as you may well know, and when you stand there and take it all in, you can feel it. Maybe not immediately, or at all for that matter. I have to wonder at the hardships those people endured, and I also wonder at how they came to be at rest. There would have been much suffering, and there are times today, if you go there, that you might feel a sadness to the place, in the air and the earth beneath your feet. Now, I am not one to frequent such places, though years ago I found myself at Bagtown Cemetery. It was night, it was cold, in the depths of winter, and it was absolutely silent. I could hear no sounds of civilization, no animals going about their nocturnal rituals, no wind sighing through trees, nothing but the sound of my breathing. I could have been in any time, in any place, standing there, listening to everything and hearing nothing. I was not in the midst of the graves, which had become the property of growth and weeds as much as the occupants that slept within them. I was on the threshold, about to cross that line, when I was stopped. By what, I hear your thoughts ask? Well, listen on, and I shall tell you. But be warned, there will be those of you who may not like what you are going to hear, be it for religious or your own personal beliefs. All I ask of you is to remember that this did happen, and for you to keep an open mind, as I am expecting you to perhaps not believe this tale, but at least believe that the possibility of this could be likely. I was considering walking on into the graves, not knowing if I should. After all, it is a graveyard, and I recall thinking to myself, why am I here? As I have said, it was cold, so cold that my breath seemed to freeze solid and fall to the ground, to wait for the sun to melt it away. And then I heard it. A sound which caused, I am certain, my heart to stop beating for seconds, and the bile of my stomach to make itself known to me. It was the nigger of a horse, soft, dreamy, and far away, though unmistakably a horse. I spun around, feeling the beginnings of dread. There was nothing to see. The darkness seemed whole. The moon had long been eaten by the clouds. In my disorientation I fell. I dared not move, nor make a sound, though my heart was screaming in my ears. I was on the ground for what seemed an eternity, frozen grass and dead leaves burning through my clothing. I didn't know what to do. I was alone. That sound was so clear that I knew it was not my imagination. I tried to calm my heart and my breathing. I tried to find logic in what I had heard. This is the country after all. As improbable as it seems, then and there could have been a horse around the place. I tried to find logic as to why I was there in the first place. Truth is, I had felt drawn there, as if called. But for what purpose? I stood up, slowly, not wishing to make a sound, and again I listened to the night, the feeling of complete tightness embedded deep within my chest. I was scared. I could feel something. Why was I there? What the hell was I doing? Still, I could not bring myself to move away, although I desperately wanted to run. And then I heard it once more, only louder and closer. The sound was the kind a horse makes when exhaling through closed lips. It was at that very moment that I knew I was not alone, and it was then also that I decided that it was time to leave. Then it came, out of a tight stand of trees, and stopped among those old graves, standing over them, a guardian. Was this why I was here? I stupidly hoped not. I was frozen with fear. What I saw was this. A horse, ghostly, faintly glowing as if lit from far within, hints of blues and greens. Astride this fearsome animal sat a man whose body finished at his shoulders. He had no head. Dressed plainly, nothing exceptional about him, apart from being there at all. He too was a light in the darkness, and although I was seeing an apparition, they both looked to be solid due to the complete darkness with which they were surrounded. The horseman rode into my view about 100 feet away from the right-hand side. Even from that distance, he and his horse seemed to be huge. I had no intention of getting any closer. I couldn't have even if I wanted to. The horse had stopped, proud and tall. They were both looking towards the trees on the opposite side of the graveyard, as if having not noticed my presence. Then the horseman's body moved, as if he had turned his non-existent head to his left to look towards me. What could he see? His upper body moved in such a way that I could not have been mistaken. At this point I started shaking, so fearful was I. I noticed also that I was sweating. My brain finally snapped and switched my legs on. I turned and ran to my car, which was only 20 feet away, though it may as well have been a mile for the time it felt to reach it. I didn't look back, and as I reached the car, that horse screamed its unearthly voice, deep, resonant and unearthly, as if speaking for the headless one upon its back, venting their anger at me. When I heard that horse, the loudest and most frightening sound you could ever wish to hear, I stumbled, and my mind was screaming at me over and over to go, go, go. My adrenaline had definitely peaked. Never had I been so terrified. The car started, for it was still warm, as I had not been there that long, though it felt I had been there for hours. I didn't look in the direction from which I had just ran as I floored the accelerator, but I could see that light, the greenish-blue halo of that headless man and his angry steed through the corner of my eye, which spurred me on even more. There was a very narrow concrete bridge, which was the only access to this place, and I was so intent on getting out that I almost missed it and would have plunged straight into the channel of water it covered. I hate to think what may have happened if that had come to pass. Onto the dirt track I turned, and as I did so, out of habit, I looked into my rearview mirror. I should have seen it, but the ghost was gone, yet the sound of that horse was still echoing in my mind. I drove straight home, not knowing where else to go. Needless to say, I did not sleep that night. Unable and afraid to, cold and shivering in my bed. The shivering was not caused by the coldness. Sleep came for me as the sun was rising, as I was beginning to feel safe again. That night was the worst I have ever known. Never have I told anybody about that night, for I was unable to. It put me on edge for so long, and never have I returned to Bagtown Cemetery, and I never shall. Although I never went back to that place, I was to learn that the ghost of that night wished for me to suffer further. After a relatively peaceful year, my mind thought less of Bagtown, though never forgot, and the following winter I had been at a friend's house not far from my own in town. Again it was cold. Walking home I had to pass a school and some vacant land. It was late at night. A sense of deja vu slapped my heart, a very unsettling feeling. It was not the last time the Headless Horseman and I were to meet. I heard the soft nicker of a horse, and I stopped dead in my tracks. But that is another story. Something is out there in the woods around Bagtown.